Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Open Book Broadcast, where we talk about anything and everything writing and publishing, and we're an open book about it. I am so excited to be here at the last episode of this year with today's guest, Alison Nissen. Welcome, Alison.
Well, thank you, Allie, for having me.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to talk to you. So Alison had me on Florida Writers Podcast. It was such a fun conversation. I had to have her come and talk over here and be the one in the hot seat answering all the questions. But before we dive into our fabulous conversation with Alison, I want to give everybody the official bio so that you are all familiar with who we're talking to today. So Alison Nissen is the Chief Storytelling Officer of Revel Coach. I love that title, by the way. A career growth platform which creates leadership programs for authors, coaches, and executives. She helps individuals perfect their public presence through storytelling. Successful leaders use key storytelling points to engage their audience and gain market share because they know that good storytelling is the best form of marketing, recruiting, and fundraising. She is also the author of the 2016 RPLA Unpublished Memoir of the Year, Resolve, Courage, Hope, and is the streaming media chair of the Florida Writers Association. So, welcome to our badass guest, Alison Nissen. Alison, let's just start with you telling us a little bit about you, like not the writer stuff, not the business stuff or coach stuff, like just who is like Alison at night when, you know, the door is shut, the drapes are drawn. Who's she?
Oh, well, we can start backwards. So I end every day with a book, which, like most writers, is probably true. And I love when I finish a book because then I have the challenge of picking out the next book. And if it's not like already assigned to me by a book club or a friend, then I have that whole platform online and I just go through. But I also have a ton of books on my nightstand. And so I get to look there and be like, what am I going to read today? And I get all giddy and excited. I live in Texas, which of course today is like, here we are, end of the year, it's December. We are about to have this like giant deep freeze thing. Fortunately, it's going to be warm during the day, but I love to sit outside and read, which I can't do right now because it's like raining and it's like 35 degrees outside and not any fun.
Yeah, I hear you. I think it's 20 something here today in Vermont. And then we're supposed to get this weird 54-degree day on Friday. And then it's supposed to drop down to 15. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with all of that.
Yeah, that doesn't sound fun.
Now, do you have a go-to genre, or is your like stack of books on your nightstand like all different types of books?
They are all different types. So my go-to genre is going to be probably like a cozy thriller or a cozy mystery, like a little bit more than just the cozy mysteries. I like them to have a little bit more beef to them than that. However, that's the one, like the default, like when I can't think of anything else, then I go there. But I do love memoirs and I love just literary fiction. There's been so many good books lately. And, you just have a hard time deciding. And then when you get into that indecision moment, that's when I fall back on that. I'm going to go to the cozy mystery.
Yep. I have a really hard time picking the next book. So what I try to do is it's like, okay, well, if I just read something nonfiction, I try to pick something outside of that genre, right? To kind of like break it up, especially because a lot of nonfiction, a lot of nonfiction can be heavy sometimes. Like, so going to something that's a little lighter feels good. Yeah. So what about how did you get into being a chief storytelling officer of Revel Coach? Like, what's that kind of origin story?
I love my origin story. So I grew up like lots of people in a family. No, I have so I grew up with dyslexia, and so many people defined my story for me when I was younger. Right, the red pen would come out, and it just bled everywhere, all over my papers. I didn't have teachers in junior high and senior high that believed I could do much of anything. I went to college, and my senior year, I actually had a professor, and I was an English major, of all things. I was an English major, and he looked at me and he said, Alison, if you were a writer, you'd have an editor. And it was a moment that changed the entire trajectory of my life because I never considered myself being able to be a writer. Now, I will say that was the first year that I ever had a computer that had spell check. So that was another pivotal moment in my life. That thank you, whoever invented spell check. They are the god of my universe. However, it wasn't until I started working and I became that go-to, can you proofread my document before it goes out to the general employee population, the shareholders, the whatever, because I just had a knack for writing, which of course I didn't think I did.
Right.
So it took a lot of time for me to nourish this. In the meanwhile, I did go get a graduate degree in literature because I love to read. But writing and reading are not the same thing. A lot of people think they are, but they're not. Like, I do think that writers have to be readers, but readers don't have to be writers. And so that started to blend together as I became a professor. I applied for a permanent position. So I had been like the temporary full-time person for like years. And then when I applied for the full-time position, I didn't get it because my competition, while we looked the exact same on paper, had written a book. And I was like, uh-oh. And I mean, I was devastated. My heart was broken. I mean, that position was mine.
Yeah.
But I didn't get it. And so that was the moment I was like, all right, I got to write a book. And then I started writing this book. In the meanwhile, I had all these other traumas and tribulations going on in my own personal life. And I thought, I'm going to write a book that's like where the bad guy gets the bad disease. That was my thing, right? Because it's like, why do good things happen to bad people? Why can't bad things happen to bad people? So that was my premise.
I like you.
By the time I got 40,000 words into it, I was like, I cannot live with this serial killer anymore. It's like not my personality. So needless to say, I put that book aside and the universe sent me an email. And someone actually asked me to write their story for them. And I became a ghostwriter at that moment. And then the rest was history. I won awards. I've become, at one point, I was the president of the Florida Writers Association. I really changed my whole story because I didn't get that one job.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so at that moment, I became a storyteller and I gave myself permission to be that storyteller, to forget about all the red pens from the past and to say, you know what, I can do this.
Yeah.
And that's how I got started. So as I became a ghostwriter, my sister wanted to go out on her own and be an entrepreneur. And since I was already being a quote unquote entrepreneur as a ghostwriter, we teamed up and created Revel Coach, which is a platform for authors, coaches, and executives where we create leadership programs for them. A lot of times, anyone who's on their way to success, they need that continued growth, but you don't really necessarily know how to get there. And that's what we started to create because we saw that gap in that market.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. So let's talk about your writing journey. What's that been like? How did you begin writing and how does kind of like, that story that other people were telling and the dyslexia, how do those things kind of fit into your writing journey?
So when I didn't get that one position, coincidentally, I got remarried, we moved, and I was like, now's the time. I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom. I'm going to write. I'm going to focus on writing. And I joined a writers group. I joined 2 writers groups, and that was pivotal as well because I would start writing little stories. And one of the challenges I had was to start a blog. So this was 10 years ago. It was 2012. And I started this blog and I would put little stories on there about my life. So they were just little, I call them flash memoir stories. So they were like, it was my story in 500 words or less is what I was trying to do. And that really helped me hone my writing skill And I would go to my writers groups. I would read my work out loud. I would listen to it. I believe writers should listen to what they put on the paper.
Yeah.
When you write, we often miss, as we proofread, we miss little things. We miss the word a, we miss the word the. We don't notice that something's past tense when it's supposed to be present tense. There's little things that we don't pick up on. But if we stop and read it out loud to an audience, all of a sudden, we pick up on things that are different. And I started to listen to alliteration. I started to listen to patterns that we form as we write, but also helping others was very beneficial because I would listen to what they said and how they'd say it. And that helped me hone my own writing craft.
Yep. Yeah. Writing groups are really tremendous, especially when they're done well, like constructive and positive at the same time. And like none of that, like just like ripping people apart and like, oh, well, that's good and that's bad, which is vague and doesn't provide any specificity to like how things could be changed or improved upon. A really great writing group is such a wonderful tool for people to have.
Learning how to be a good critique partner is a skill.
Yes.
And, you know, one of the great ways to start is just to use the sandwich method. Say something nice, give constructive feedback, say something nice. There's a lot of different techniques that people can use, but that's just a really simple one. And it helps when you can frame the conversation in that positive way, because you can't grow if someone keeps pushing you down. And so it's really important that we build people up.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when they've got like, you know, stories like yours where their papers were marked up for decades and now they've got it in their head that they can't write, or they're, you know, it's going to be much harder time for them to write because of whatever programming and narrative, you know, is their default setting when it comes to their own mindset around writing. What's your favorite part of writing?
I think ideation is probably my favorite part of writing.
Yeah, me too. I like to do things.
There's the ideation, and then there's the end. Those are the best parts.
Yeah.
Everything in the middle is a lot of work, you know.
Yeah, I also like that when it comes to running. I like the idea of running, and I like when I'm done running. But like the running, man, what a slog. So we mentioned the podcast earlier, and then you also mentioned that you're in Texas. So how is it that you run the Florida Writers podcast, but you're living in Texas? What's that connection like?
I was living in Florida when I joined the Florida Writers Association, and I was president while I was still living in Florida, and I became a lifetime member. So once you're a lifetime member, you know, it doesn't matter where you live. However, the Florida Writers Association has members from all over the world. So we have people that are living in other countries, not just in Florida.
Nice.
And while the majority of the people are in Florida, the world has become such a big place, or such a small place, depending on how you want to look at it, because you can just hop on the internet and there you have a program. So this past year, I was fortunate enough to be the chair of their conference. So we had an annual conference. And it was so much fun because we didn't have one for 2 years. So we hadn't been together for 3 years. It was so much fun to get, you know, back to see everyone in person. And there's so many programs, you know, when you get to rub elbows with other writers, it's just so much fun. And we all get giddy and geeky at the same time.
Yeah. We have here in Vermont, we have the League of Vermont Writers, which I've been a member of for a number of years and served as the president and board. And it's similar in that you don't have to be a Vermonter to be a part of the group. But, you know, Vermonter is in the title. So I totally get that. And yeah, it is kind of fun when you're in person and you're totally geeking out over all of the book and word nerdy things that like other people wouldn't get. Now, how does the podcast fit in with kind of like your writing life and even your writing practice, or doesn't it?
I've considered myself a student of writing. Like I mentioned, reading is my first love, and literature, you know, I love literature. I love all things about wordplay. And so to me, I consider myself more of a student of writing than a writer. And the podcast is a great way for me to learn from others. I love asking, you know, well, what's your day look like? What does your desk look like? How did you get started? Do you belong to writers groups? Do you, what's your publishing journey? Some people have great publishing stories.
Yep.
I've done a lot of self-publishing, so I don't have that same publishing journey that a lot of people have, where they've gone out and they were discovered and it was this awesome ride. And then there's other people that they work tooth and nail in order to finally get an agent, and then their story is so complicated and complex and yet rewarding at the same time. But then there's the people that are more like me, and they prefer the self-publishing. I have a friend who's a novelist, and she has had well over 1 million views on her pages on Amazon. And she puts it such that, if she would have gone the agent route, she's like, I'm 55 years old. If I would have gone the agent route, I'd be 60 before my book's even published. In the meanwhile, she's had four books put out, and has sold probably, in the tens of thousands of books, because she did it on her own. And otherwise she'd still be waiting until 2024, 25 in order to actually get there. So,
yeah. So it sounds like then, like the podcast is almost like a little school, because you're learning from your guests as you go, and you're tapping into different processes that people have, different practices, different journeys and routes. And folks that are catching the replay, go check out the Florida Writers Podcast. I mean, it's available to you to go and listen to and to get your own education. You don't have to be living in Florida to listen to the podcast. So go check out the conversations that Alison is having. So now, Alison, I know that you're working on a book. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what your book is about? When are you hoping is it going to be available? Give us those details.
Yes. So it has a working title that I have to change because it just doesn't fit my brand the way I want it to, meaning I have to say the title, which is, so right now the working title is You Can't Bullshit the Universe. But I'm like, I don't think I could say that like in front of my dad's friends, I love it. So I love it. I've got to adjust it. So who knows? We'll come up with some sort of title. But it's a combo book. It started off with as our book. So my sister and I, like I said, we have a business together. And it was supposed to be our story. The idea, the motivation behind it was how we work together. Why are we able to stay close and have this great relationship and be business partners, right? Yeah. A lot of people will say, how does that even happen? Well, this is how it happens, is that I was starting to do the book. I was putting all this time into it. And then she was like, I can't. I have writer's block, bad. I can't do it. So I was like, forget you. I'm going to do it on my own. But each chapter starts with the journal prompt, and she's putting in the journal prompts for the beginning of each chapter. It is basically it's a memoir of Alison, with having a lot of insight to how my sister and I grew up. So how our family had been developed as a strong, cohesive family. Most people have very complex stories, and I'm not any different. And so I was really able to bring out a lot of the complexity of those stories, but in such a simple way. It's a very emotional, heartfelt story, and yet it's very uplifting and positive. And I am super excited. I have a couple of editors that are going to be looking at it soon. And then I'm going to self-publish it, because I don't want to wait 5 years to find the right agent and the right publisher. Finding an agent, it's been explained to me. This is one of the things I've learned on my own podcast, but it's been explained to me. It's kind of like a marriage, right? You start dating because you want to make sure you're the right partner for somebody. Yeah. And an agent is the same way. I mean, it has to fit together, and that takes time, and you have to be willing to tip your toe into that pond in order to be able to do it. And I'm impatient.
Who's not? I mean, we all want kind of, more instant gratification. But we also want our work to get out there. We don't want to be waiting decades to see it be in the hands of readers who want it and need it, So yeah, I mean, traditional publishing doesn't really have the advantage of a fast timeline, the way that some of these other models like self-publishing do, for sure.
Right. And there's definitely ways to make sure your message gets out there as a self-publisher. It doesn't have the same image and the same reputation that it did 10, 15 years ago. When I was teaching 15 years ago, and I can remember, we'd sit around the faculty lounge and professors were like, no way, no way will my students ever have an ebook. Like, that is just the most horrific possible thing ever. And I have students that download their ebooks on their phones now. They're reading on their phones. They're no longer having a physical book. I mean, I'm surrounded by physical books, but I get it. The world's changed.
Yeah. And publishing has had to change with it. And thankfully it has, because there's plenty of really great books and writers that have been rejected by traditional publishers, whose books end up doing very well and are very successful. And if there hadn't been those avenues, they wouldn't be out there. So I think, thank goodness, there are more models to choose from. And I was just talking to somebody the other day who has been in the traditional kind of space a long time, almost like somebody who helps you find an agent, which is just like one other person in the lineup of people that you need to even get to a publisher, who is basically saying that like traditional publishers now aren't really looking at anybody who doesn't have 10,000 engaged followers on some platform. And I'm just like, are there that many people who have 10,000 plus engaged followers? And how did they do that? Like, it's just like mind blowing to me that that's like the cutoff or something. It makes me feel like, about how, SAT scores are, the thing that like gets people into certain colleges, when it's like, well, maybe they're just a bad test taker. What about all of their other brilliance and genius that they're good at in all kinds of other ways, or the rest of their package, So I don't know. I honestly, in my own business, don't have a lot of people who are that interested in traditional publishing because of the hoops and the timeline and, just all the things that they have to do to like get their book out into the world.
I recently had a conversation with Marilyn Allen, who is a non-publisher, non-fiction agent. And what she said, she did mention the 10,000 followers, but what she said is, she said she doesn't really look at the amount of followers that people have, but if somebody if they're a physician and they have a large practice, she'll look at that. So somebody who's engaged in the community is something that I think is very interesting to publishers. So if you might not have the following, on Twitter, so to speak, or Instagram, but if you are engaged in the community and there's people that know you within the community. One of the other things I learned that I thought was really interesting was that places like Barnes & Noble are now, they've untethered the managers, and the managers can actually select their own books. So if you're local, you can go to your local Barnes & Noble and say, hey, I'm in the community and I would love to have my book on your bookshelves. So you just really need to focus on what what publisher you use. So if you use straight Kindle, it's not going to work, of course. But there's other ones that will use platforms that Barnes & Noble can upload or use on their system. So that's a really interesting thing. And again, now bookstores are adjusting for the self-published.
Yeah, and a good thing they are. They have to, right? Otherwise, they're missing a part of the market. Mm-hmm. Now, when do you think that your book will be available to folks? What are you shooting for?
I'm shooting to be finished Q1. So that's right around the corner, since we're starting in about a week and a half.
Yep. Yeah, January is coming up fast.
Let's just say 3 months and 1 week. But that's my personal timeline. It's an arbitrary timeline. So maybe this summer it'll be available.
Yeah.
And great. I plan to do, a marketing campaign. I like places like Kroger's now actually you can schedule with certain Kroger's depending on what state you live in. And they actually have a place you could bring your own table. You can set up your own book signing in a Kroger's now. And wow. So I know in Florida, Texas, Colorado, I think California, And they have a ton of different stores that they, that operate under the Kroger brand. Like my stepdaughter and son live in Denver, and they have King Supers, and King Supers is a Kroger store, and you could have a book signing there. So I'm like, woohoo, road trip. So I'm going to go hang out with them and do a book signing up there when I'm ready.
Beautiful. So I'm trying to get the link to information about your book into the comments for folks. It'll definitely be with the description of the video, like show notes kind of thing on YouTube, so people can go and check that out. Now, so you're going to be busy working on this book, obviously, and trying to wrap it up. In the meantime, where should people be connecting with you so they can kind of follow your journey and what you're up to?
Yes. So, author Alison Nissen is on Facebook and Instagram, or Alison Nissen on LinkedIn are probably really great places. We would love you to subscribe to revelcoach.com. And I also have AlisonNissen.com, where you can find a lot of stuff. But AlisonNissen.com will probably be changing just a little bit as I get ready to ramp up the book. And so I'm not 100% sure that all those pages will be accessible in the near future. However, but the Instagram and the Facebook, author Alison Nissen.
Okay, let me get that into the comments. I've got the revelcoach.com up on the banner, but let me get into the comments what you just said. So connect with Alison on, you said Facebook and Instagram?
Yeah. The Facebook author Alison Nissen is probably the one I would post more on.
Okay. Let me just make sure I've got that spelled correctly. Instagram at author Alison Nissen. Okay, we're having a little bit of a lag in putting things into the comments, so I'm just making sure that everything's spelled correctly, and that we've got, author needs to have an R. Okay. All right, so that's in the comments. Awesome, because we're definitely going to want people to be getting in touch. And then is there any kind of like freebie that you offer for folks from the business side of things, from the Revel Coach side of things, that you want to let people know about?
Yes. Well, right now we are offering a 50% off Teams workshop. So that would be a 90-minute facilitated virtual Teams workshop. So we like to promote Cloverleaf. So we teamed up with Cloverleaf, which is a personality assessment platform that's really fun, and we have 3 freebies on there. If you go to Revel Coach, you can do an Enneagram. I'm trying to think of which ones are Enneagram. I think is a disc, and there's one other. There's 3 of them on there that you can do for free anyway. But we also offer 2 executive coaching sessions with those, and that's at revelcoach.com. If you go and you look under programs for teams. So those are fun and exciting to do.
Awesome. Beautiful. Okay, let me put a few of those things into the comments as well for folks in case they are interested. And like, Alison, what are you just like jazzed about for 2023? Like it is just right around the corner.
Seriously, isn't it? I am jazzed. I am jazzed about so many different things. I'm starting off with a vacation in Mexico, so that'll be really fun. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, getting out of this colder weather. Yeah. And then obviously completing my book that I keep saying, I keep talking about. So it'll be nice to have that off my plate. I am also starting work at a new college. So that will be fun and exciting for me. It's back face-to-face, which I haven't been face-to-face in 5 years. I'm so excited for that journey. Yeah. And really, that's it. At the moment, that's that first half of the year, so to speak.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So many awesome things. All right. I'm still trying to grab this 50% off team workshops information here. But again, with the lag, I don't know, folks, the internet today. All right. Trying to get this into the comments before we wrap up our conversation here. And if it doesn't get into the comments, folks, I'll be sure to add it in the description of everything. Okay. So Alison, thank you so much for joining us for Open Book Broadcast. We can't wait to see you updating all of your channels with when the book is available and coming out. And wishing you, much success in getting it done by the end of Q1. And folks, we'll be back with Open Book Broadcast in January. Our first conversation is actually going to be a recorded conversation and not live. So we'll be announcing that when we've got it up and available. We'll be going down to one interview a month for Open Book Broadcast in the new year, but that's because we've got some other live series that we are developing behind the scenes right now to bring to you starting in the new year. So stay tuned for all of that fun action. In the meantime, you can visit us at therightplacerightTime.com. Head over there, see what we're up to, jump on our email list. You'll definitely be hearing about the live series via our channels, LinkedIn predominantly, because that's where we like to hang out and play the most. So we're wishing you a very happy holiday season, peace, joy, good health, safety, all of the things, and looking forward to being back with you in 2023. So take care until next time.
Thank you so much for having me.